Hello, boys, girls, babes. Welcome back to the Janae Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. And ooh boy, what a week our Caps just had. A perfect week. We will throw in the baseball reference there since it was also opening week for the MLB last week. Blue Jays, baby, let's go. An absolute wagon to cheer for up here in Canada. And it's always nice for people in Toronto to have the Jays and the Raptors to cheer for since the Maple Leafs are so completely incompetent in the playoffs. But yeah, how about them Caps? As I said, it was a perfect week for the boys in red, white, and blue, going 3-0-0 with all three wins coming in regulation. And with all three wins coming against very good cup contending teams, those being the back-to-back champion Tampa Bay Lightning, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Boston Bruins. So we're going to break it all down for you here right now. Let's talk about all of it. And first, let's talk about what's probably driving this string of big wins and stellar play from the Caps, those being the players-only meetings that they held last week. Yes, you probably remember, even though it feels like forever ago now after three big wins, but the Caps did drop a couple of ugly ones prior to their current winning streak. They lost 6-1 to the Carolina Hurricanes, and then they lost 5-1 to the Minnesota Wild. Obviously, those are two very good teams as well. But, I will say this. I just want to get this in there. Like, those games came with a huge break in between, right? Like, I think there was 6 days in between games for the Caps. Which I always find, kind of hilarious with the NHL scheduling, because it's like, here, we'll make you sit around for 6 days doing nothing, no games, and then you can come back and play, back-to-backs and 3 and 4 and 5 and 7 and crap like that. The Caps didn't even get 24 hours in between their games this past weekend. They played in Pittsburgh, 3 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, and then they had to come back to Washington to play at 1:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday against the Bruins. So, that makes no sense at all, and it's not very often that you see that in the NHL, not even having 24 hours in between games. It's not exactly safe for the players, but, that, of course, it makes those two wins, and both of them in regulation, like I said, it makes them all the more impressive. Boston, they were rested for their game against the Caps, and the Caps were playing only about 19 hours after their game in Pittsburgh ended. And the refs gave the Bruins the first 4 power plays in the game to boot, so it was kind of you better get off and running right away. But, it didn't matter ultimately. Washington was able to kill off all of the Bruins power plays. They made it look pretty easy, actually. And then they went on and scored 4 goals at even strength, and obviously took the win and the 2 points as well. So, but yeah, we'll get to that. Very interesting playoff picture shaping up in the Eastern Conference. So we'll get to all of that. But my point was that the Caps were off for a long time when we're looking at those losses to Carolina and Minnesota. And as any real true Caps fan who has followed this team for a long time will know, and will tell you, this team never plays well after a long layoff like that. Never. They just don't. We've all known it for a long time, and we've just come to accept it. It is what it is. But still, that being said, it still looked pretty ugly on the scoreboard, right? No one likes to look up and see 6-1, 5-1 lit up on the board there. So the Caps leadership group, Ovechkin, Oshie, Backstrom, Carlson, Wilson, they call a players-only meeting following the second of those 2 losses, the 5-1 clunker to Minnesota. And players-only meetings are usually utilized for just basically, generally getting your shit back together, getting everybody back on the same page, pulling on the same rope again, because it is a long season, and shit can get away from you, and usually does at points throughout the season. But the key, right, is to nip it in the butt before it gets out of hand. And so that's exactly what the Caps leadership group does here, and obviously it worked. And I think when you have a super tight-knit group like the Capitals do, and you have that real family atmosphere in the locker room, then that's when I think that these players-only meetings can actually be really effective, because guys are truly listening to what the guy next to him has to say. So, so players-only meeting, and then the Caps have since gone out and, like I said, rattled off 3 straight wins in tough circumstances, tough scheduling against very formidable opponents. So it's a really good sign, you guys. It really is. And so we'll do a little recap of the games for you right now. But first, I just want to really make mention of exactly how these games were won for the Caps as well, because I think that, like, for me anyways, their style of play is at least equally, if not even more, important than the wins themselves for the Caps as they speed toward the playoffs here right now. So 10 games left now in the regular season, so it's coming up quick. So I just think that coming out of that players only meeting, it should be really encouraging for the Caps and their fans, the way that they played in order to get these 3 victories against these 3 very good and potential playoff opponents for the Caps as well. 3 very good teams in Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, and Boston. And the reason it should be encouraging is because it's very obvious that the Caps players themselves understand exactly how they need to play in order to be successful. And they've showed that they can execute it perfectly against very good opponents. Opponents who, like I said, they'll have to beat at least some of these teams if they want to get to where they ultimately want to be when all is said and done at the end of the playoffs here. So, but yeah, like, these guys clearly get it, because, like I said, players only meeting, and then all of a sudden it's like a switch gets turned on. They come out and they play physical as all hell en route to 3 straight victories. And if you ask me, physicality is really the key for this team, because there's not many teams in the league, if any, who can match what the Caps can do physicality-wise. Like, the only exception is maybe the Nashville Predators this season, but I mean, like, you're not seeing them in the playoffs unless it's in the Stanley Cup final, which I'm pretty sure we would all be fine with, right? So yeah, like, the Caps are big, they're strong, and they're fast when they're playing well. So they can look slow when they're playing poorly, but they are a fast team when they're playing well. So they have to utilize that, and they definitely did in these games against the Lightning, Penguins, and Bruins. They have a lot of really big forwards in their top 6. Obviously, guys like Alex Ovechkin, Tom Wilson, Anthony Mantha, TJ Oshie as well. Like, he's not as big, but he still throws his body around as if he's 7 feet tall. So the Caps, like, even their skilled guys are built for that type of game. And that's why they've built their team that way, I feel, is because their skilled guys are so physical as well. So you kind of build your team like that. You fill out the bottom half of your lineup like that as well. And they've historically always been pretty successful whenever they play that way. It's how they won the Stanley Cup. It's Caps hockey, baby. So getting in on the forecheck, forcing turnovers with big hits, winning battles all over the ice, whether it's in the corners or in front of the net or anywhere else. You create a lot of offense that way, as we've seen, and you win a lot of games that way. We saw that a lot in these last 3 games, in particular against the Lightning. Against the Lightning, the Caps threw 30 hits. I'm just pulling it up here. Against the Lightning, the Caps threw 30 hits. Against the Penguins in Pittsburgh, 39 hits. And then against the Bruins the very next day, again, only about 19 hours later and in a different city after traveling, you would think that the Caps would be tired, but nope. They threw 45 hits at Boston, banging up a couple of Bruins players in the process. So you always want to take a chunk out of somebody if you can, if you can do it legally, leading into the playoffs. So, a good job with some hard, clean checks there by the Caps. Matt Grzelcyk left the game for the Bruins, and Charlie McAvoy was banged up as well. Brad Marchand looked like he was hurting quite a bit too after taking a big hit from Tom Wilson. So, anytime that you're getting to that 30-plus hits range in a game, like, that's a playoff game. That's playoff-style hockey, and the Caps are very good at it. So they just have to do it consistently, and hopefully, like I said, these 3 games, these 3 wins were the start of that. Because when you get 3 wins like that in regulation, like I said, and against 3 very good opponents, then that kind of reinforces that for you. Like, it kind of sticks it in the players' heads, like, hey, we can beat these guys in the playoffs if we play this way, if we play the right way for us. Like, the physicality, was pretty obviously a sticking point in that players only meeting. And then some other things that they've been doing really well these last 3 games as well. Just a much better commitment to the details of the game, and especially on defense, blocking shots, making sure to get pucks out, not trying to be too cute. And all of those things add up, of course, usually to outshooting, outchancing, and ultimately outscoring the other team, as we saw in these last 3 games. So they've been really resilient as well. Not only, like I said, with the scheduling and, they were dealing with last minute lineup changes due to illness and injury and what have you. Obviously Garnet Hathaway missed the game against the Lightning with an illness. Then he comes back and he goes straight to the top line, not his usual 4th line spot. He goes straight to the top line because another guy in Connor Sheary goes out with an illness for the game against the Penguins. Then the next day, Nicholas Backstrom is out for that game against the Bruins. So the lines get jumbled once again. So they've been really resilient, obviously, in that way, but also in game as well. Really in game, with coming back in games. Coming back in games that they've gone down, and also with answering quickly, scoring quickly after the other team either takes a lead or scores a goal, and definitely with the officiating as well. They've been resilient, when they seem to be getting called for everything while the other team gets called for nothing. That game against the Bruins on Sunday, obviously being the perfect example of that. So, but yeah, we can break it down game by game here. So the game against Tampa Bay, the Caps took a 2-goal lead in the first period, and they never gave up the lead, because every time the Lightning would score a goal to make it just a 1-goal lead, like I alluded to earlier, the Caps would answer right back, making sure to get the next goal, and just kind of keep the tying goal out of reach for the Lightning, was essentially what they did. So, it was 2-0 Caps. Tampa scored to make it 2-1. Then Ovechkin scored to make it 3-1. So he restores the 2-goal lead for the Caps. And then Tampa scores to make it 3-2. Then Carlson scored to make it 4-2. So once again, restoring the 2-goal lead for the Caps. So that's a pretty good way to hold on to a lead, is to just keep playing your game, just keep playing in the other team's end of the rink, and just keep scoring to keep the game, like I said, out of reach for the other team. Against Pittsburgh, the Penguins took a 1-0 lead just 45 seconds into the game. No worries, though, because the Caps tied it just 16 seconds later. So that's kind of exactly what I'm talking about. The Caps have been really good recently answering the bell. The other team scores, they get it right back. It doesn't matter if the other team is scoring to get within a goal of the Caps, if the Caps are leading, or if the other team is scoring to actually take the lead. It hasn't mattered the situation. The Caps are answering quickly, getting the goals right back. So, so like I said, Penguins 1-0 lead, 45 seconds into the game. Caps tie it, like I said, just 16 seconds later. And then the Penguins scored 2 quick goals within a minute of each other right at the end of the first period to take a 3-2 lead. A couple of goals that honestly had me screaming at my TV over Ilya Samsonov's play. Two bad angle goals, they were bad goals, right? Give the Penguins a 3-2 lead. So that's the type of sequence that that dooms most teams on most nights, right? Because it's frustrating. Couple of quick bad goals, but not the Caps. They were not doomed by it. Ovechkin, he would tie the game again early in the second period, and the Caps would never give up that lead again after that, going on to score 3 more goals while giving up none, and winning the game ultimately by a score of 6-3. So they double up the Pens in Pittsburgh, and then against Boston, almost the exact same scenario as against the Penguins. The Bruins had scored 2 quick goals within a minute of each other, to take a 2-1 lead. But then the Caps rattled off 3 unanswered goals to take a 4-2 victory. So, like I mentioned, the Caps were extremely resilient when it came to the officiating as well. So they had to get through a couple of penalties late in the third period against the Tampa Bay Lightning in order to preserve that victory. And then against the Pittsburgh Penguins, we all know what the officiating is always like whenever the Penguins are involved. But the Caps' penalty kill was perfect, and they even managed to keep their cool when Sidney Crosby sucker punched Nick Dowd right in the fucking head for no reason at all, as the play went the other way. Crosby will not be receiving any discipline from the league for that play, just in case you were wondering, which, you know, if you know how this league works, / if you've been paying attention for the last couple of decades, you were not wondering. You already knew he wasn't going to get anything, not even a fine. He was about to get a 2-minute minor penalty on the play, so that's at least something. But the Caps went up ice and scored on the ensuing rush, so there was no need for the power play. Sid back to the bench with his tail between his legs, as per usual. But anyways, then the game against the Boston Bruins, this was probably the worst officiated game of the three, which is really saying something. But if you can tell, like, in my tone of my voice right now, that I'm frustrated with the officiating, it's been brutal. Like, all season long, it's been brutal. It doesn't matter which team you cheer for. But yeah, like this game, the Bruins had the first 4 power plays of the game, despite committing several obvious penalties of their own, all of which went uncalled for some reason. But again, like I said, it didn't matter, as the Caps successfully killed off all of the Bruins power plays and eventually went and won the game at even strength. So to recap, physicality, attention to detail, and resiliency. That's what has the Caps winning big games right now. And they've also been owning the third periods in these last 3 games, like seriously owning the third periods, which has been important because when the games have been close, that's when they've really stepped it up and they've been able to take over the games in those third periods in order to secure the victories. So it was especially impressive against Boston because, like we mentioned, the Caps were playing that game on just 19 hours of rest, and so they should have theoretically been tired, especially by the time that they got to the third period, but that wasn't the case. They absolutely took it to the Boston Bruins in the third period, outshooting them 15-6 and outscoring them 2-0 in what was a tie game heading into the third period. So against the Penguins the day before, same thing, tie game heading into the third period, but the Caps took over in the third, outshooting the Penguins 19-7 and outscoring them 3-0 en route to a 6-3 victory. So big third periods against the Lightning as well. You know, like the Caps, it wasn't quite as dramatic. Like the Caps already had the lead going into the third. But they still outshot the Lightning in the third period, and they held strong on defense as well, allowing just the 1 power play goal to the Bolts. So, you know, giving them nothing at even strength. That's always important, especially as you head towards the playoffs. So, like when you can play that well and take over games like that when the game is on the line, when the score is still close, then that's a pretty good recipe for success. And obviously it bodes extremely well for your chances in the playoffs as well, where almost every game is close and many of them are still tied or within a single goal heading into the third period. So there's a lot to like, a lot to love about the Caps over the last week of hockey. They're playing really well. The players only meeting, sounds like they had a couple of players only meetings actually. I think they had them like 2 days in a row. But obviously, you know, that had the desired effect that the players were looking for. And a big thing that players only meeting tells us as well is that the Caps aren't going to be satisfied with just being a good team. They don't want to be good. They want to be great. And they believe that they can still move up in the standings. They're finally getting healthier, and they know that they are a really good team. That's undeniable. They're a really good team when they're healthy. And probably a team that none of the number 1 seeds, whether it's Florida or whether it's Carolina, probably the Caps are probably a team that neither of those guys want to see in the first round of the playoffs, because there will definitely be potential for an upset. So the players, like I said, they want to give themselves the best possible standings, positioning, the best possible shot at having success in the playoffs, because they believe that they can make a lot of noise in this Eastern Conference, even if it is as a wild card team. Although, you know, they are catching up to Pittsburgh for that number 3 seed. So that seemed very unlikely just a couple of weeks ago, but the Penguins have been slipping, and the Caps have been hot. And obviously, you know, that victory over the Pens in Pittsburgh in regulation, you know, that obviously went a long way toward helping the Caps' cause in that department as well. You know, it's probably like the race for that number 3 seed in the Metropolitan Division, it's probably over if the Penguins win that game in regulation, but they don't. The Caps win in regulation, and because of that, they're just 4 points behind the Penguins now, and the Caps have 2 games in hand. So, like, if they win those 2 games in hand, then they're tied with the Pens in points. Honestly, like, if I were the Caps, though, you know, I wouldn't shoot for any higher than 3rd in the Metropolitan, because, like, I really think if you are this Caps team, you want to be playing the majority of your playoff games on the road. Like, this team is so good on the road. They've got the best road record in the entire NHL this season. In fact, they've got the best road record in the entire NHL over the last 3 seasons. And it really did start with them winning the Stanley Cup, where they were absolutely incredible on the road. You know, they set an NHL record for most victories on the road in a single postseason. And they, of course, clinched all 4 playoff series in 2018 on the road. So really, ever since then, like, this team absolutely loves playing on the road. So no team in the league is going to have, you know, a so-called home ice advantage if their opponent is the Washington Capitals, because the Caps are incredible on the road. So you get my point. Like, don't go any higher than the number 3 seed, Caps, please. Road ice advantage, baby. Let's go. Anyways, so to wrap up this episode, let's just take a quick look at, I just want to take a quick look at a few of the individual performances for Caps players over the last week. Like I said, it was a perfect week. So Captain Alex Ovechkin, he had a great week. What else is new, right? He scored in all 3 games. Again, what else is new? He had 4 points and he was a +3. Also, you know, diving a little deeper into the stats, he threw 14 hits over the 3 games last week, and he also blocked 3 shots as well. So he was just everywhere, all over the ice, particularly against the Bruins, with his Caps playing the second half of a back-to-back. He was an absolute animal. 6 shots on net and 7 hits against the Bruins. Video game numbers. Like, that's something that you see, like, you know, in NHL 96. Like, it's just crazy. The guy's an absolute cyborg. He does not age. I think he's made that very clear. So the fact that, like, at 36 years old, not only he's going to have another 50-plus goal season here, which, by the way, will be an NHL record of 9 50-goal seasons when it happens. But the fact that, like, at 36 years old, and in game number 72 of the regular season, that he can go out there on just 19 hours of rest and be the best player on the ice. Like, that's just insane. So kudos to Ovi, and kudos to Ovi's personal trainer as well. Like, my God, that's got to be a great marketing pitch when that guy's looking for new clients, right? Like, hey, I trained Alex Ovechkin. Yeah, you know, that guy who was still scoring 50-plus goals this season in the NHL into his 40s? Like, sign me up. So anyways, aside from Ovi, John Carlson and Tom Wilson were probably the other 2 best Caps this past week, with John Carlson actually earning second Star of the Week honors from the NHL for his efforts as well. So Carlson, he put up 3 goals and 8 points in 3 games for the Caps last week. So no coincidence with numbers like that all 3 of those games were wins for the Caps. Casual reminder that John is a defenseman putting up these types of numbers, just unreal. So he also would have had a hat trick in the game against Tampa Bay if not for an offside challenge. You know, so there's that, you know, you're 1 millimeter offside and it had no effect on the play whatsoever, but we're still taking the goal back. There's that rule, right, from the NHL. So the NHL, once again, taking away the happy fun times. So why does Gary Bettman hate fun? Maybe that is the question that we should be asking. I bet he hates puppies as well. Anyway, John was also a +3 last week, and blocked 6 shots, had 0 giveaways, and 3 takeaways. So yeah, like, anytime that you're averaging a goal per game over 2 points per game, a plus per game, blocking a couple of shots every game, and averaging a takeaway per game with 0 giveaways, while your team, by the way, goes 3-0-0 against stiff competition. You're probably definitely getting an NHL Star of the Week. So great stuff from John, who along with Ovi, Wilson, and the rest of the leadership group put his money where his mouth was after the players-only meeting. So it was the big dogs leading the way for the Caps this last week. And how could I nearly forget as well, by the way, that Carlson also had a ridiculous diving poke check. If you didn't see the game against Tampa Bay. Ridiculous diving poke check on Braden Point in front of the Capitals net in the dying seconds of their 4-3 regulation victory over the Bolts. So most likely preserving the regulation dub for the Caps there, as it's not very often that a guy like Braden Point is going to miss from there if he gets the shot off. And that dub started the Caps off and rolling. So again, kudos to John. Great week. And then we look at Tom Wilson, who had a hell of a week for the Caps as well, scoring game-tying goals, scoring game-winning goals, and just generally being a complete menace to the opposition in every sense of the word, which is exactly what we love to see from Tom. So, he scored the game-winning goal late in the third period in Pittsburgh, which is obviously hilarious on many levels. It was also absolutely key for his Caps, like we said, in that Eastern Conference playoff race, as it gave them the win in regulation. Very important in regulation, preventing Pittsburgh from getting even a single loser point and turning it into essentially a 4-point victory for the Caps, who gained on the Penguins immensely in the Metropolitan Division race over this last week. So Tom, he then scored the game-tying goal against the Bruins the very next day, and the Caps would, again, never give up the lead in that one either, en route to a 4-2 regulation victory. So it also set a new career high for Wilson, who scored his 23rd goal of the season in just his 68th game. He is quite literally only getting better and better and better year over year over year, which is great news if you're a Caps fan. Very bad news if you're a fan of any of the other 31 teams in the league. So anyway, all in all, Wilson had 2 goals, 3 points, and was a +4 over the week's 3 games. He has 4 goals in his last 6 games. Against the Lightning, he threw 3 hits and blocked 4 shots. Against the Penguins, much to the delight of the Pittsburgh crowd, he was probably the best player on the ice for either team. Obviously, like I mentioned, scoring the game-winning goal. He also added an assist, and he also threw a whopping 8 hits. Again, blocked 4 shots. Had 1 takeaway, played 21-43, which was a high among all forwards, and that included as well leading all players in shorthanded ice time and not even giving the Penguins power play a sniff at the net. The Pens power play went 0 for 3 on the day, and he was a +2 in the game. And you get the point. Like, he was amazing. Best player on the ice, like I said, for either team. He also did an amazing stare down of the Penguins bench after he scored what would eventually stand as the game-winning goal late in the third period. Seriously, it was epic. Epic goal, epic stare down, just all around epic stuff. And then the next day against the Bruins, he again had a great game. We already mentioned that he scored the game-tying goal against the Bees, but he was also a +3 through 3 hits, including nearly ending Brad Marchand's life, blocked another shot, and was again an absolute force on the penalty kill as well, frustrating the Bruins to the tune of their power play going 0 for 4. He was all over the ice again, so particularly, like I said, on the penalty kill, like, he was just a thorn in their sides. That performance on the penalty kill gave the Caps the chance to actually get in the game once the referees finally put their whistles away. And then we know the rest, another dub for the good guys. So the Caps have been, great at even strength, great on the power play, great on the penalty kill. They've been one of the best 5-on-5 teams in the league pretty much all season long. Their power play, like since March 1st, I believe, is number one in the league. Their penalty kill since March 1st is number one in the league. So like they're all over it lately. They did, like we said, have a little bit of a letdown in those couple of games against Carolina and Minnesota. The back-to-back losses there. But other than that, like they had a great month of March, and they're off and rolling now here in April. So I also want to just quickly shout out Martin Ferravari as well. The kid had an incredible week for the Caps. Not only did he score in back-to-back games against the Lightning and Penguins, but he was also a physical and defensive force out there in all 3 games last week. And really, he's been that all season long for the Caps. Man, did the Caps find a gem with this kid. Against the Lightning, obviously, like I said, he scored a goal. He was a +2. He threw 6 hits and blocked 2 shots as well. No giveaways. Against the Penguins, he scored another goal. But the real story was that he had 9 hits in the game against the Penguins. 9 hits. Those are Tom Wilson numbers, folks. And he again had 0 giveaways, giving the Penguins absolutely nothing to work with. He played 21-25 in the game, which was second among defensemen to only his defense partner, John Carlson, who, as we've said, also had an incredible week. So then against the Bruins, just for good measure, Marty finished off the week by throwing another 4 hits, blocking another shot, and again, he had no giveaways and 1 takeaway as well. So he played 21-12 against the Bruins. And again, that was second to only his D partner, John Carlson. So he's getting a ton of minutes. He's been amazing. 19 freaking hits in 3 games, folks. This kid embodies the way that the Capitals want to play. He's afraid of no one, which you don't commonly see when it comes to rookies. Like, the kid's a beast. I guarantee you, if that draft was happening over again today, he'd be going in the first round for sure. And perhaps best of all for the Caps, Sidney Crosby seems to absolutely hate this kid. Like, I don't know what it is, but Marty's really gotten under Sid's skin already in his first season in the NHL. He's already goaded Crosby into taking a number of stupid penalties. That's perhaps because Ferravari has been all over Sid like a pig in shit every time the Caps have played the Pens, giving him 0 time, 0 space, hitting him every chance he gets, and giving him a little extra after the whistles as well. Just kind of all of the things that a good defenseman does, and Sid is just a bitch and doesn't like it. Oh well. Anyways, that's all we've got for you today, folks. Episode's getting a little long here, so the Caps' next game is Tuesday against the Philadelphia Flyers. The now Claude Giroulas Philadelphia Flyers. I keep forgetting that. So as always, thank you all so much for listening. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. It's that little button that says subscribe. You can do it. You're here listening already anyways. I'm just bugging you guys, but seriously, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. We really appreciate it. Share us with your friends and your family and your fellow Caps fans, your fellow hockey fans in general. We always like to, have more people to discuss with. So we are available now as well across all major platforms. So basically anywhere and everywhere that you would get your podcasts from, we are on there. So like I said, subscribe, share, send us your comments or your questions for next week's episode. And until then, babes, enjoy the game against Philly. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week, and let's go Caps.